Welcome to the Deconstructed Woman podcast, a podcast about breaking down barriers between women, exploring and sharing perspectives of each individual woman's experience, and discovering what we have in common and what makes us different. Hosted by Elisa Marie and Joji. So, welcome back to the Deconstructed Woman podcast. Today, we have Lisa with us again for kind of a part two in which we want to talk about mindfulness, a continuation of the conversation, but also applying that to parenting and what that might look like. And I was talking about how I'd been starting to follow a couple of individuals and looking at how you apply mindfulness when you're talking about. Uh, you know, trying to regulate yourselves, try to stay calm in the moment. I'm just seeing a lot in the kind of parenting realm of you need to be calm to help your child be calm. And I think that that's something that I particularly struggle with because I don't naturally have a calm demeanor. I'm kind of a more, um, if we talk about different responses, I'm kind of the fight kind of response and the fight and flight, freeze or fawn. And so this is an area that I've been trying to work on, but I wanted to bring Lisa back to kind of get her input on what that looks like and what that might be for somebody who is maybe has similar characteristics to me or is just kind of newer to the parenting realm. Because I think that this is something that, again, if it doesn't come naturally, something that you have to consciously work on. So, Lisa, I just want to kind of jump in. I think one of my first questions and thank you for coming back onto the podcast with us. But one of the first questions I want to look at is how to pause. Like that's the kind of starting point of what I'm reading about. And so wanted to kind of hear your input on is that related to mindfulness or is that what mindfulness can do for people?
Yeah, thank you, Elisa, and it's great to be back. I'm really excited about continuing this conversation. So basically, mindfulness is pausing. The definition of mindfulness is to be present in the moment on purpose, without any judgment. And a definition I like for mindful parenting is the effort to bring awareness, attention, and curiosity to the interactions with your children, and that really involves listening, reflecting, and choosing a response, or choosing to respond in a way that can uplift both the parent and child. That sounds great on paper. I know it's hard to implement. Um, so, but pausing is different, obviously. So, paying attention in the moment, taking those pauses. I just want to say, I'm going to kind of go in a little different direction and then come on back. But so there are lots of tools and lots of ways to remember to do that and how to do that. But first of all, I think in order for us as mothers, as really busy women, and what we have to remember is self-care. You know how they say, put the oxygen mask on your child first. So making sure simple things like you've taken time to eat, you've had enough water, you know, you want to stay hydrated. If you're just drinking coffee all day, that's not going to cut it for you and actually dehydrates you. Um, sleeping enough, getting some fresh air. So, not to say you have to be perfect with this or that you have time to do it all the time, but to come into a place of pause, to remember to pause and to take a few breaths or whatever it is that you need. You have to have those, I think, basic self care um, tools implemented. You have to have the basics done. And one of the ways, so, knowing, and then it's like a double edged sword, right? Because it's like you're so tired and you're so maybe or you're just overwhelmed or you're frustrated or whatever it is. Like, how do you remember to do those things and to take a breath and to pause? So, that's why I'm saying the self care piece is really important, even if you can just do some of those. I want to make sure none of this, I don't want you to look at it and make a list and say, okay, I have to do this and I have to, I think we are also, we get too overwhelmed or involved in being perfect with what we do as a mom, as a employer, as a wife, as a daughter, whatever it is. So, and some of the ways to To pause is really to breathe, to pause and take a deep breath. And sometimes that's just one deep breath. It doesn't mean you're going to have everything you need, um, or you're going to have enough time to do. I'm going to sit for 10 minutes. No, but can you pause and take a few breaths? Can you? And by doing that, when you take that pause, then you can remember. Then you can notice. Oh wow, I'm feeling kind of shaky right now. Oh, I haven't eaten and it's noon. Or then you can notice, I need to drink some water or I need to just sit down for a minute. Whatever it is, it's in that pause, it's in that breath that we can sort of reevaluate and take a look at how we're doing. And and sometimes, it's hard to get out of the habit of just doing, right? We're just busy, busy, busy. Um, and so, how do we break that habit? Well, we can, it's something that we have to identify, and then we start, by identifying the behavior, and then the fact that we want to change it, noticing what when it's happening. Okay, I'm feeling this way right now, and committing to doing something. And that commitment can be, again, looking out the window, taking in nature, um, you know, going out to your mailbox just to get some fresh air, or taking that mindful pause by breathing. And if you're running around, you're, running yourself ragged and you feel like, okay, this is like not going well, sit down and decide what would make the biggest difference in your day, something small. What can you commit to doing, right in this moment? So,
Yeah, I really love that. Sorry, I was
yeah,
gonna
go
jump
ahead.
in just because I think that, I mean, this is a lot of what I'm hearing out there, and I think that for me, the hardest part is that, and I 100% agree with you, like the self care, and I'm noticing that if I'm not, like you were saying, like running yourself ragged, if I'm not at my tank is empty,
Right.
I'm much easier and much more able to pause and be able to say, okay, let me, let me take a moment, check in with myself, that sort of thing. So I 100% would agree with that. I think that when I get to that, like my tank's empty, I've just kind of been going, going, going. I'm like really calm in the morning and in the afternoon. And then by like early evening, when it's almost bedtime and the kids are kind of getting rowdy, like that's where I start to slip back into old patterns because I have kind of depleted that. And so I agree with you that, that's probably the time. Like, I think, the last couple of nights, like the dishes were piling up and I was like, you know what? I'm not going to do the dishes. I'm just going to sit. I remember this happened yesterday to me because the kids had a play date and they went outside and my 2 younger kids were I have 4 kids. So the 2 older ones were outside playing and the 2 younger ones were taking a nap. And I was like, "Oh, I should do the dishes." I should like, clean up. And I said, "No, you know what? I'm gonna sit down on the couch and just read for a little bit."
Mm,
And it was so nice because it's out of my ordinary because usually what I would do is, okay, the house is quiet, everybody's, doing their thing. I should clean up. And of course, now I have dishes today that I have to get through, but that was worth it to be able to have that time.
I think that's so important. And you took a break, and that's sitting down and reading a book. You took that break, and what's so important about that is you're interrupting the habit of going, going, going. Right? Our mind is set where we do things automatically. So we have this well grooved pathway. It's our neural pathways. And we have this well grooved pathway of, oh, everything's taken care of. Let's clean. Let's, pay bills. Let's do whatever it is. Um, and we can what's great about the brain is we can create other neural pathways, and we do that when we do things like this. We break up the pattern. We stop, we read, we rest for a moment, whatever it is, we let those dishes go, because then the more that we do that, the more we'll remember to do it, because now we're paving a new path, right? And the brain can go, "Oh, hey, I remember, sometimes I take a break when it's quiet. I don't go into cleaning and cooking or whatever it is." And so, I think the fact that you did that yesterday was a perfect example of how to kind of break that pattern, how to keep going. And then what happens is then in the evening, when you are, things are unraveling, it's getting hectic and everybody's tired and you got to get them to bed. then you have you have that, um, let's say, the recall. Like, not that you're going to pause and go read a book when all this is happening, but maybe you'll pause and take a breath and notice, okay, what needs to be done right now? Well, I'm exhausted. Do I ask my partner to help? What is it that you can do that you can implement in that time? Maybe all I can do is take a couple breaths and say, okay, I'm not going to respond. I'm not going to react. I'm going to respond if I can mindfully, or I'm going to, I don't know your specific situations, but so do you see when you have those moments of calm earlier in the day, those are their times to implement the pause, to practice breaking the habit. And then in the evening, how can you apply some of those? Or sometimes, you know, just acknowledging how you're feeling. And this is something we can acknowledge with our kids too. So for instance, you might pause and go, "Oh man, I am exhausted or I am so frustrated right now." Name what it is. Sometimes they say when you name it, you can tame it. And you name how you're feeling
Mhm.
and just, and even telling yourself, "Okay, yeah, I'm frustrated right now and I'm here with you and we're frustrated." Or, "Yes, this is really hard. Take a breath." That little bit of self-compassion can come in. And then we can also teach our kids to be like, well, how are you feeling right now? And I have a little example of that later I can talk about for kids. But do you see where that can start to come in? And so you can identify what's going on. If you can take a breath, notice, and then see how you want to proceed versus how you normally react. Um,
Mhm.
yeah. I'm just wondering, how does that sound?
Yeah, no, and I had read something about that recently, because I follow, Hunter Clark Field, who has the Mindful Parenting, podcast and the Healthy Emotional Legacy with Elizabeth, and so they're 2 people who talk about these pretty regularly, but one of the things that they had said is exactly what you're saying, to name the feeling and talk about it, and to be able to say, like, "I'm frustrated," like, not to try to hide those feelings, but to be able to express them. And it's funny because I probably say that about 20 times a day. But my kids know, like, okay, I'm mom's frustrated. So they kind of sometimes they'll wind down or they'll kind of give me some space. And so it's helpful in that they now know, okay, mom's getting frustrated. She's probably like a 2 or 3 right now. But if we keep pushing her, she's going to get to like a 7 or 8.
Yeah.
And not that it's their responsibility to regulate me, but that they know, like, because I told my husband too, like, when I'm overwhelmed, that's when I start yelling the most. And I've been
Mhm.
really trying in the new year to reduce yelling,
Mhm.
but it's just ingrained in me. It's kind of just my go-to for everything. But that's why the pausing and the mindfulness is something that I wanted to look into,
Yeah.
because a lot of times they were saying if you can get yourself to that point, you can reduce the yelling. So kind of transitioning with that being said, so we talked about pausing, taking some breaths. I know that I've also heard like having picturing your child in some like happy, like somebody said they were picturing their child as a baby. And just like that was helping them to kind of view their child in like a different way when they're really acting out,
Mhm.
or positive affirmation. So those are some things that I've heard, but are there other tools that you've come across that you think would be helpful for parents in that moment as they're trying to put in the pause and try to integrate some mindfulness to help them?
Yeah, and I think that's a great idea as you picture your child, happy. And the other thing is, in the moments where, whether it's chaotic or it's calm, it's important too to find. I always think to find gratitude, like that moment you're like, wow, the kids are playing outside, the other two are sleeping. Take a moment and just notice gratitude. Like, I'm so grateful for this moment right now. That's just a way to uplift you to help you feel better. And and some of the other, um, picturing your child, I think is great. And then, and I just wanted to step back and say, as you are naming what you're feeling, I mean, you can name it out loud to your kids, but also just even if you just name it to yourself and acknowledge it. And like you said, don't push it away. Have it come to that it's here. I'm here with you. Frustration. and we're going to work through this. But some other things, so practicing compassion is really important for yourself and for others, and that's what I was just saying. Pause and by naming things and telling yourself, this is really hard right now. I'm feeling this way. Be aware of your thoughts. And acknowledge what you are feeling, like we just said, and remember that your thoughts are not always facts. There's reality and there's truth, and sometimes we get ahead of ourselves and start going down that road of, oh, we don't do this, or if I don't get this done, or if the kids don't get to bed, they're going to be tired for this event. We can start to go into the spiral of the what ifs, and so we want to make sure what we're telling ourselves is true and not just some that we're catastrophizing, or we're just like, oh, we're just, and that happens when we're tired and we're worn out. um and then just again being aware of the breath and trying to relax the body, and also accepting things as they are. And that can help with responding versus reacting. It is what it is right now. It's a mess. I'm going to step into it, in a different way, in a different, taking that pause or whatever it is. But just, hey, okay, this is a mess right now, and that's okay. That's the way things are. Um, and so those are some of the things that I think are good for parenting self care tips.
Yeah.
And then, there's a couple little things here around that I wanted to mention around, some fun things to do with your kids, depending on their age. I thought this was a great idea, is to get a mindful bell, whatever that looks like, some sort of bell in your home, and, have it available for you, or anyone. If your kids are a little older, they can perhaps ring it with responsibility. When it is wrong, the idea is everyone in the home pauses and takes 3 breaths. Now, that might not work for very young children, but, for a little bit older, I think even toddlers could do this and stop whatever you're doing, feel your breath in your body, try to relax, feel the sensations, be in the present moment. And you can make that kid friendly, however you would say that. That might be a kind of a fun thing to do, especially when things are getting wound up at night, maybe, or when you're trying to get out the door. Even if you're in a hurry, you might want to ring the bell just to say, okay, one breath, and then we're going to reorganize here. And then there's another kind of fun thing. It's called a mind in a jar. And you just take like a ball jar and you can put water in it and glitter. And the idea is you explain to your children that when the water is calm and clear, that's like our mind. Our minds can be calm and clear. And when our thoughts that's when our thoughts and feelings are calm. We can see through the jar, right? But when we swirl the jar up, we can't see so clearly. And that's when our mind is very active or activated. So we can't see through the jar. And if we needed to make a decision or respond thoughtfully to someone, we would be very challenged to do that in that moment, right? If your mind is all stirred up. So, it's important for children to understand that our thoughts and feelings are not bad. Even when they are upsetting, they are part of what makes us who we are. Mindfulness teaches us to grow in that awareness of our internal and external states. So, to be curious about our thoughts and feelings. So, I thought that jar example was a good one too.
Okay, if I could jump in here, I was just going to say that I love that jar idea because you could almost create an exercise where nobody can maybe talk until all the glitter settles. Gives you a chance to sort of use it as a timer as well. And children are usually, and I am too, really sort of dazzled by glitter. And so maybe sometimes as it's settling, it's also an opportunity to practice like a moment of silence or something as everything settles. And then the discussion can resume.
Mhm.
I had bought from the stores like a Sesame Street calming kit.
Hmm.
And I didn't really know what was in it. But it had a jar with the glitter and a little booklet that came along with it. But it was a really cute thing that the kids, unfortunately, the jar got thrown in the room at some point, and so now their floor is permanently glitter. So make sure that the jar maybe can't break like it's plastic or
Yeah,
something.
good point.
As a side note, now that we have a permanently glittered floor, but it was when my kids were really small, like 4 and 2. Now they're older. My oldest is almost 9, and my second oldest is 6. So we're kind of getting into like older things that they can do, but that used to help them. And with my 2-year old, I actually do a lot of the breathing. Like when she's getting really riled up, I'll say, let's take a deep breath. And she's really good about doing that, which is so amazing because and sometimes we'll do it together because I'm actually trying to calm myself down. And, it's dually helping both of us to kind of bring us back to like ground us so we can move forward because she has like she's just very loud and sometimes it's like, okay, it's too much. Like I'm dealing with this over here and you're screaming and that's too much. So I think that all of that's really helpful. I also like the idea of like the jar, um, or the bell. I was thinking like, oh, I could just see my kids like pressing the bell like 20 times in an hour, like just kept pressing it. But I think that it's a nice idea of like a reminder for everybody to pause.
Mhm.
Like I know so Joji and I have talked about self-care, and we've talked about a couple of different things. The thing that came to mind was like when we go on road trips, I always get really worked up and anxious about like making sure we have everything and making sure that like everything's, ready to go. The house is cleaned up and whatnot before a trip. And so what my husband and I started doing is we start doing a rosary as soon as we get in the car, we do a rosary and it kind of helps us to bring ourselves down. It's a different, I mean, it's got obviously a religious underpinning, but it just helps us to all kind of start that trip off in a very different mentality instead of just like the crazy hustle and bustle of everyone get in the car. Then we calm ourselves so that we can start that trip on the right foot. So that's something else that like we have started doing that really helps our family to kind of regroup when it gets a little too chaotic.
Yeah, those are great ideas, and those are all ways in which you break that habit. You interrupt the mind and start to pave that other neural pathway of, you know, shifting and being calmer. And yeah, and I think I love that road trip one, and the bell might be something you have to put away and only you can control it. And and the kids doing the breathing, yeah, I mean, I'm always impressed how young kids will just, yeah, drop into that type of thing. And the beautiful part about that is look at what you're teaching them, for school, for the rest of their lives. They're learning these wonderful skills to come back and be with what's here, and to pause, and to not push things away, or, shove them under the rug, but know that you can be with your emotions, with your feelings, and there's tools to work with those.
I
Yeah.
think also mirroring for your children to be able to understand their emotional level and when to step back from it. I know that one of the things that my daughter in law has said is that my grandson will use the curtain as a way to get some privacy to understand what's going on with him. I think that's the way we interpret what he's doing. I don't know what he thinks he's doing, but he'll say, I need privacy. And then
Mm.
he'll go and sort of create that space for him, and then he'll come out when he's ready. So I do think there's a role modeling that is also teaching kids, okay, I need to wind down. And so there's lots of ways I think we teach our children. And I do think when you were talking, Alyssa, I always thought with the bell and everything, I thought to myself, I wonder, is it a good thing or a bad thing if we all took a time out? I haven't really thought about it. And Lisa, maybe maybe you can speak to it. Like, is it bad if we were to say, you know what, we all need like a 5-minute timeout, and then we all sort of go into our separate spaces, and then maybe when the microwave dings, then we all come back and start over again. I don't know how that feels. I don't know if it feels like a failure as a parent, or if that might be also a good thing. I'm not sure if either one of you have a response to that.
I would say like I mean, I don't know that we've done it as a whole family, but we definitely have times where we all need to take a break from each other. I mean, there's 6 of us in a household and on the weekends in particular, we're all together kind of 24 to 7 and I think that it can be a lot. Like it can be overstimulating for some my kiddos and sometimes for me as well. And so I have no problem being like, "Hey, I'm gonna take some time. Let's all do our own thing." So I definitely don't see it as a failure. I definitely see it as like you need to I've been starting to say like we need to reset.
Mm.
So especially if we've had a particularly hard morning There's been a lot of yelling, there's been a lot of frustration, big feelings, whatever it is. I say, okay, guys, let's reset. And the kids are starting to understand that that means, okay, let's take a moment to kind of regroup and let go of like the hurt or whatever happened in the morning so that we don't have to have that impact our entire day. And my son has created himself a calm down corner.
Oh,
It was quite funny. We did that a couple weeks ago where he has a space that's like his calming space. The problem is now that my other two, the older kids, want a calm down corner as well. And I'm like, I don't know how many corners like of my house I'm gonna give up, 'cause he took over the coat closet, and I only have, like, one other closet that I could possibly be, like, a calm down corner, so I'm just gonna have calm down corner. Like, my daughter wanted to use one of my cabinets in the kitchen, and I was like, "No, no, you can't have that cabinet." But I mean, like, it was just funny because I think they were naturally saying, like, "I need a space where I can just kind of breathe and have a moment to myself that nobody else is gonna come into." So I think they are saying that inadvertently through their discussions of where their calm down corners can be, that I think everybody needs a space where they can just be like, okay, I'm going to go here, have a couple minutes to myself, and then regroup.
mhm. Yeah, I think all those are wonderful. Um, and again, you're teaching your children to find ways to reset, to calm down, to regulate how they're doing and how they're feeling. And another thing I thought of too is there's something called a feelings jar where you take colored pieces of paper and you put different emotions or feelings in the jar. And then that might be another way to calm down, especially if the morning was reactive, is by pulling one of those or pulling them out and talking about what it means, like frustrated. Was anybody frustrated this morning? Was anybody sad? Was anybody really angry? So those are some other things. And I think, and I love that your son created his own little space. That's just beautiful. I mean, and it's kind of like hiding behind the curtain, like Joji said. So, I think all those things are so beneficial, um, for children and for parents too. I mean, if they see you doing it, they're going to do it as well.
And Alyssa, do you remember when we were talking about in one session that sometimes we as adults or as women, we're always rushing from one thing to another, especially those of us who are, we work outside the home. And so I was thinking about it too, that would it have interrupted the pattern if I had taken like 5 minutes before rushing from work to home to start dinner? Like on one hand, you think that not spending that 5 minutes just makes everything go by better or faster, smoother. But I almost feel like when Lisa was talking about interrupting the pattern, I just wonder if I would have been more effective throughout the night if I had given myself permission to maybe sit in the parking lot before I headed out from work and just sort of grounding myself and then using that drive home to get into a home mental state instead of just rushing and running out the door into the car, running to the house, and then starting. I just feel like that would bring a certain experience to the home and maybe even infect the house.
Mhm.
I don't know, but I was thinking about that as we were talking. Like, looking back, that was something that created more angst for me. And I always thought, I didn't like it. Like there's not enough time. Like I would almost psych myself out before I even got home. And then you start at a number 7
Mhm.
and and that's the first impression your kids have of you after you've come home from work. I don't know, but that's something
Right.
I was thinking about while you guys were talking.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge thing. I unfortunately or fortunately, like I only have a 3-minute drive to my daughter's daycare, which is great. She's very close to my work. So I have this very small window before I pick her up and then I go and get my infant and then I get home. And so there's not a lot of downtime and but I've heard so many people talk about you need to kind of like regroup. And so there's as I'm getting the kids out of the car, like I keep telling myself, especially I think this was more prevalent when my husband was home with the kids because I knew that when I walked through the door, the house was going to be in pure chaos. And I love my husband, but he just doesn't see it the same way that I do. And so, like, I would walk in and there's just stuff everywhere. And so I would have like, the 15-20 minute drive home by myself back then when he wasn't working. And I would sit in the car and I would say to myself, okay, it's going to be chaos. It's going to be fine. Like you can clean it up. Just like go in with a smile. And inadvertently, like the minute I saw it, I still like, I could already feel myself getting worked up because it was just like, oh my gosh, like I'm so tired from work and now I got to clean this up. So I think that that's an area that I do agree. Like your children, like, if you can put something in place so that when you get home and the first time they see you, you're not, you don't have like this grimace on your face and you're like, oh, overwhelmed. I think that's a great thing. I'm still, I mean, like I said, so I have the two younger ones with me on the way home. But sometimes I put like fun music on, then we just kind of jam out on the way. That helps me to kind of decompress from the day, leave my work at work and be able to like laugh and have fun with them. And I think that that's been helpful. And, just to kind of get me in a different mindset before I walk through the door. And typically now the older kids don't make as much of a mess. So it's not as much of a as like it used to be. It's kind of shifted, but I definitely think that that's something that if you can put that pause in. I know my husband, he's really into the rosary, so he listens to a rosary on the way to work and on the way home. And he seems to be much more calm than I am. So
Mhm.
maybe there's something to it because that's what he does.
Yeah, I feel like that's such a great point, Joji, because I remember oftentimes in my mindfulness classes, that would be sort of like the homework, besides maybe picking one thing to be mindful about every day during the week. But when you get home, just pause, sit in your car, take a few breaths, let go of the workday, because sometimes you're coming in with a lot of work stuff that's frustrating you. And then when you're ready, I mean, give it whatever amount of time you have, then proceed into the house. And the same with the other way around. I would tell people before they go into work, or whatever the situation is, can you pause for a minute in your car? Can you take a few breaths and ground yourself so you're not rushing from right, you're jumping right in from one activity to the other. And I love the idea that Lisa, that you said about putting the music on. Yeah, break everything up. I mean, I think music just, it can activate us to feel good, to, loosen up, to um, forget what maybe forget what your kids are upset about or what you're worried about. It's a beautiful way to break up things. Yeah, some great ideas.
Lisa, I was wondering, as we were talking now about this, even this idea that I brought up, I just started feeling about how many excuses I would have not to do it in terms of like, I don't have the time, like I work too long, I need to get in the car, I need to go. What are some of the I know why I wouldn't. What what I would say to myself to force myself to get in the car and go. What are some techniques that we can use to reinforce that that is going to be the right thing to do? I don't know if I'm being clear. I think what I'm trying to say is my anxiety about getting home and starting dinner, starting homework, starting whatever would dissuade me from using that strategy. What can we do to break that so that we actually take just a minute to stop and that that's going to yield better results in the long run?
Yeah, that's a great question, Joji. And I think what comes to mind for me is remembering that we don't have to be perfect, that things don't have to be a certain way, so we have to be a little bit more open. And also, again, that self compassion piece that no, you can't run on empty, you can't just keep going without having some bad side effects. So you want to remember that to be the most that you want to be for yourself and your family, you have to take those breaks. That you will be more effective and you will be more hopefully calm and and you will be able to come into a situation and feel a little more refreshed as opposed to thinking, well, I just wasted 3 minutes in the car breathing or something. The time isn't wasted. It's time that helps you be a better person all the way around. And it's taking care. It's part of that self-care that, remember, we can't keep going from empty. We can't just give out anymore. And then we just, Uh, it isn't a commitment to, being a good parent isn't a commitment to martyrdom. It only works when we're stable enough to slow down and choose your optimal responses and that type of thing. So I think letting go of perfection, remembering self-compassion is really important and self-care. And and knowing that, and I think just the experience of it, hopefully, I don't know if Elisa, if you found this, but when you do have that little break, that little mindful pause, that when you do come into the house, yes, you might still go like, "Oh my gosh, this place is a mess," but maybe you're still walking into it in a better mindset. So sometimes just the experience of it can help you to keep doing it. It's hard, I would imagine, the first few times, or maybe more than that, depending on your anxiety level or how you're feeling, but I think the more you practice it, the more it will you'll reap the benefits.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that that's it, and I think that the main theme also is that this is a process and it's not something that, is gonna kind of overnight, you're gonna just be like the most calm person, when you're kind of going into any situation that's kind of triggering or whatnot. But I think that it's the idea of like the more you practice that pause, the more that you practice trying to, like you said, changing those, those neuron pathways. I think that that's where you eventually get to, but it is a process. Like, I mean, I'm kind of very new and very early in this, but I mean, I was really surprised that yesterday I took a pause and took some time for myself. And that was, I had to really kind of fight against myself of like, no, you're going to sit down, you're going to relax for a moment. Because I'm so, like you said, so used to just going and, you know, doing things constantly. So I think that, as long as people understand that this is not something that they're gonna naturally just be like, okay, I took a breath and now all is well. There's a little bit more to it, but I think that I'm not sure if you had talked about this last time, uh, but Lisa, can you kind of let people know if they want to reach out to you or touch base with you, how they can get in contact?
Yes, absolutely. So I think my website would actually absolutely be the best way, and it's my first name, lisasparagna.com. And will you have my name in the show notes, or do you want me to spell my last name? Or
You can spell it, but we'll also try to get it in the show
yeah,
notes.
so just Lisa, Lisa, and the last name is Sparagna.com. You can email me through the website. You'll see what classes I have, different things that I'm doing, the women's work that I'm doing, the women's circles, the Monday night meditations are just 30-minute quick, jump on, no video, so you come as you are. Some other programs I'm doing on right now, I'm doing a more on self-compassion and um, self-kindness. I think it's just so important that people in the world start to bring that into their lives. So those are some of the things, and I'm happy if you have any questions regarding what we talked about today. I'm happy to chat with you, or you can email me and let me know. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. And Joji, I don't know if you have anything else. I was going to close us out, but I wanted to make sure that I didn't, jump into quickly.
No, no, I'm good. Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, as always, you can also email us at the Deconstructed Woman Podcast at gmail.com. And you can leave us a voice message or feel free to jump into our Facebook group at the Deconstructed Woman Podcast. It's out there. We have it linked, but we would love for you to join our community where you can get involved in the different discussions. We try to post when our episodes launch. We also try to put in some questions, just kind of things that come to mind, and kind of start that conversation. I think that that's always kind of the preface or the premise of this podcast is that we're starting these conversations and then kind of as a jumping off point. So if this is an area that you have kind of struggled with or that you have thoughts on, or maybe you have particular areas that have been difficult for you, we'd love to hear from you so that we can kind of continue that conversation beyond today. So listen in as we continue into next week, but we would love to hear from you and we thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. The Deconstructed Woman. If you like this podcast, please share it with your friends, rate this episode, or subscribe to be notified of all new content. We want to hear from you, our listener. Do you have thoughts on the discussions we're having? Want to share topic suggestions? Or want to join us for a topic that you're passionate about? Contact us at our email address, thedeconstructedwoman@gmail.com.